Hello, folks. This is Apple Treats, and today we will have an interesting episode, and we will talk on the future of Comine with Marin Todorov. Irina, hi.
Hi,
Marin.
hi, everybody. Welcome, Marin. Can you give light intro of yourself firstly?
Hey, hi Dennis, hi Irina. So my name is Marin, and I've been doing a lot of interesting things. I think in the last 10 years on Apple platforms. I worked on iOS software. I worked on macOS software, and besides developing, I really like writing as well. So I worked on a number of books with my friend Ray Wendlick, who's got a publishing website for tutorials, books, video course, and so forth. And I worked on interesting contracts, and I worked on a lot of open source. But I guess we can delve into all of these topics as we go along. Thank you for inviting me. That was really nice.
Yes, thank you for coming.
Let's start with a topic that I think pretty close to you. Do you think that reactive functional programming is stylish?
Well, is it stylish? Do you mean if it's fashionable or if it's like beautiful?
Or like a code look and feel and so on.
Right. I think I really liked it. I think the first time I really understood what it's all about, which took me a while, but after I understood what it's all about, I really thought it was a very smart way to direct data flow around your app, and I really find it's really great. It's a really great way to express what you want to achieve instead of how you want to achieve it.
Right. So when did you actually learn or like started using the reactive approaches?
Right. So I did go to a lot of conferences in the last 5 years, I think, or rather, last 5 years I didn't go to as many as the previous 5 years. Well, there was a period where I was to a lot of conferences, and I kept seeing introduction to RX and introduction to RX Swift talks, and I really didn't get it quite like instantly. But it did sound interesting, and it did look exciting. So I think around mid 2015, I started with RX Swift. I met an interesting person online who then I get to know in real life called Florent Pilet. He's from Nice in France, and he helped me get started with RX Swift at the time. And the Slack, the RX Swift Slack, was really full of interesting and very helpful people. So they got me started, and as soon as I got rolling with it, I also started helping in the Slack as well. So it was. I think it's not so easy to get started with. There's like a little bit of a steep hill to get like rolling, and so that's why everybody, especially in the Slack, were so helpful, because everybody knows like how hard are the first few steps, and they're really eager to help.
Right. So you mentioned RX Swift, and recently Apple introduced their own version of the reactive framework. So they introduced Comine. Do you think they like win the competition here? Like, how do you compare it? And there were a lot of comparisons when the Comine was introduced. Some people tried to compare the performance, the operators themselves, and like we have RX Swift, we have reactive Swift, we have reactive Kit, and I probably missed some more reactive frameworks there. How would you compare them? I mean, like, did Apple great job here, or they need to do something more? How do you think?
Right. I think that most of, well, first of all, I think if we look back, the very first reactive implementation was the one that was written for .NET, and this was quite a long time ago. I don't really remember. It was 2006 maybe or so, or well, it was a long time ago. And kind of like the guys and gals at Microsoft are the ones who kind of like came up with this idea, and they kind of like wrote the spec of what the contract of emitting values over time is and how would it work. And they had the first implementation, which then became open source as well. So I think that if we have a look at like a bunch of different reactive frameworks, they all kind of like stem from this kind of like same root. So they are not so different, I think. And if there's somebody out there listening and is really convinced that they're very different, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's just like how I feel, like, since they all like kind of sprouted from like the same stencil, I think they're very similar. So yeah, having experience with RX Swift really helped me get started like instantly with Comine. So things are very similar. And in terms of performance, I haven't really run any tests myself. I can't really say who's faster and who's slower. But I think that like back from where I come from, there's like this proverb that there's a passengers for every train. For whatever reason, like people thought it was very clever, and so I think that like some people will use reactive Swift, other people will use RX Swift, and there's a whole we cannot deny that there's a huge crowd which will not use larger third party dependencies. So I think Comine answered mostly their needs. There were people that would use reactive programming but would never really base their project on a third-party framework. So I think they're all nice. I had a look at like most of them, and they're fairly similar. Comine is winning with that crowd that wouldn't use the large dependencies. But I know that other large applications that have existed for a while are still actively using RX Swift, and they're also contributing back to the repo as well. So I can't really say if there's a clear winner or not. Or have you looked into that, or?
Well, I looked a couple of articles in terms of initially there were like comparisons with the RX Swift, and they were like saying that there are similar issues with the RX Swift, and they are like basically migrated to the Comine. But also there were a couple of tests in terms of like performance when you like send thousands of events and everything. And here Comine was a clear winner for many of the tests. So probably that's the value types instead of classes there, and maybe that helps. I don't know. I mean, but as of now, I see that we still have a lot of projects with the RX Swift. I mean, basically because they like still using it. And one more thing which I liked is the Open Comine implementation, which is now available on the GitHub. So they are even trying to like put the Comine on the platforms which do not have like native Comine, but you have Swift, for example. On Linux, they will use the Open Comine implementation, and when you push that to the build that on the platforms with the Foundation and Apple's frameworks, it will use the native Comine, let's say native. So it's kind of interesting. But what troubles me when I was watching like last DocC, there was literally 0 sessions with Comine. And it seems that either they forgot, or like there are 2 options. Like basically the Comine is perfect, and there's nothing to do more, nothing to improve, and like just like watch the previous one, and it's or should we somewhat prepare to like migrating from the Comine or even from the reactive approaches altogether? I mean, like we do now have structured concurrency, we have async streams and everything. So is it a sign of something like coming, like the Comine was? But it's like very short-lived in this case. Like it was announced just a couple of years ago, and that's it. That's too sad, I think.
Well, I don't think that it's not necessarily like Comine is going away, but I do think that especially async sequence and async stream are to a bigger degree replacing simple use cases of publishers. So if you just have one publisher which misvalues, and you just want to subscribe that and do something else with the values asynchronously, I think there's no need to bring in Comine for that anymore. But first, structured concurrency is supported on macOS 12 and iOS 15 and higher. And so if you want to write reactive apps right now, you still need to fall back on Comine. And also, I think Comine offers a lot more out of the box. So with async stream and async sequence, you have to do a lot yourself if you want to build like a complex app, or like if you want to run a complex UI, you still need to do a lot yourself, build your operators or build your publisher and so forth. While Comine offers a lot more out of the box. So I think that not necessarily Comine is going away. It would probably be used for more complex projects. And most apps are not complex projects. I must say that most apps are, you fairly easy, just fetch some JSON from the internet, show it on screen, and allow the users to make changes and so forth. But I think this kind of apps are probably never needed Comine in the first place anyway. So, so I think that they have their solution now with like the news async stuff, and maybe, like very complex UIs could still make good use of Comine. And, like I was thinking this morning about this real quick, and I remembered about Sprite Kit when Apple first introduced it. I think it was iOS 7. And so they introduced it like kind of like polished and ready to use. And then I think for about 2 years, they didn't really introduce any new APIs to that framework, because it kind of like probably answered their first idea that they needed before. And then they found like new applications for a framework like that. And they started adding more and more, like after a 2-year gap, when they found like that, when they came up with the, what was it? There was like this gravity fields that you can like siphon particle systems into, and then these gravity fields will like throw them away, create very crazy effects and so forth. So, maybe now we didn't have big updates for Comine for a couple of years because teams were focused on other things, but they will find some other application for it later on. Just speculations though, but
right. We also have one comment from our viewers, listeners. So they basically say that there are rumors. I mean, I do not know about those, but there are rumors that the Comine was actually ready back in 2014 when the Swift was introduced, and it probably was not ready for the rollout. So it was ready internally, and maybe it was evolving during that time, and that's why it's just perfect now. But who knows?
I can say either way, but it's true that Apple oftentimes works on things for a really long time. So maybe, who knows?
It actually could be.
Reactive approach is a nice way to write code, but are there some downsides of this, some typical issues and hard to debug problems and so on? Do you have a list of such common issues?
I do have, I do have a list of things that are not so fairly easy. I think
that worse?
I think that's a great question. I think that's really. I think it strikes a nerve there with a lot of people because from what I've seen, I think with reactive frameworks, it's easy to solve some fairly complex problems, but it's also easy to make some fairly easy problems completely difficult to solve. And so, I mean, I think that one should use reactive frameworks as little as possible, and so only like when they really fit the use case. Because I've seen code bases that try to use everything, just for everything to use Comine or Arc Swift, and so they will like tangle all the view controllers as streams, and all the inputs in the controllers as streams, and all the events as streams, and all the handling UI events as streams, and also all the notifications that you get like from screen rotation or other things as notification as streams. And so I think at what point first the performance degrades real quick, and second, it's really difficult to maintain this database because once everything is tangled like into one big knot, it's really difficult to jump in a database into this source base like later on and just make changes. And so my approach is to use navigation or use notifications as much as possible, but then things like handling network responses or binding a data model to a table list and things like this. These simple use cases that I know that work fairly well and are really quick to write. These ones I always do them with reactive code, but I don't try to do everything with Comine or Rx. And so I think this is one of the problems that is a really bad, pitfall for especially people who are beginners with reactive.
And I would agree, it's sometimes tempting to do everything in this chain of processing of the events, and then you get stuck somewhere there and see in case of problem you see the call stack I don't know, hundreds of lines there, and you basically get lost where exactly the event comes from and everything. But we know you as the author of TimeLane, and this is the tool which basically specifically created to solve problems with the reactive code. Am I right? First of all, what problems does it solve? What was in your mind? What you was trying to solve when you created the TimeLane?
Right. So exactly what you said, just now. When you have, especially when you have a bunch of streams that also depend on each other or somehow interact with each other, it's really difficult to debug. What events were emitted, when they were emitted, and were then subscriptions completed or did they fail, and so on and so on. So it's not really obvious what's going on, but it's also time sensitive. So it's not really also something that you can just step through in the debugger real easy. So this is why I've worked on TimeLane. And so TimeLane is an Xcode instrument. So instruments allows for custom instruments to be written and loaded into Xcode instruments, so you can use them alongside any other instrument to profile your application. And so TimeLane allows you to add the lane operator to any subscription, and then this will be visualized on a timeline in instruments with all the values that you emit and all the events that you emit. And so you can plot a bunch of subscriptions and then see how they were positioned in regard to each other on a timeline, and what values were emitted, which ones were error complete, and so forth and so forth. So kind of when you are exactly when you're in this situation where you're not sure what's going on and you really need to figure out what's going on, but you don't want to write hundreds of prints in your code. This is the situation that TimeLane solves for.
Mm-hmm. And can you compare TimeLane to signposts logs?
Right. So TimeLane is basically a glorified signpost instrument. And so with a signpost, you will just log either time intervals or values into instruments. This is what signposts allow you to do. And this is exactly what also TimeLane does. It's just that TimeLane has these couple of operators that you can use on your Comine publishers or on your Rx Swift publishers, on your reactive Swift code, and so forth. And so these operators make it really easy to funnel the data into instruments. But it does use signpost logs behind the scenes. It just makes it transparent for you, so you don't have to write this code yourself.
Okay. Let's switch topics now a bit. So we already mentioned the structured concurrency and other stuff coming in here for the Apple platforms, but we still have a lot of even when Comine was introduced, a lot of APIs are still using the completion handlers. And now, again, we see that probably the URL session is actually one of the frameworks which gets most of the attention. So it got publishers when the Comine was introduced, and now they have async methods for the data retrieval. But again, a lot of other frameworks are still completion handler based, and some combines. And how do you think, how long it will take to move to the new this structured concurrency thing, basically? And I was reading the forums, and it seems that, again, probably the decision is not yet made, but it might be that we will not see the backport of the async await to the iOS 14 or 13. So again, that limits a lot what we can do with it right now. So how long it will take to adopt this approach from your perspective?
Right. I think that's a fair question. I think that is it's inconvenient for existing products that these new asynchronous features are not backported. Of course, I feel it for folks who need to support like a project that is, runs 3-4 versions back. They cannot really even use Comine, so this shouldn't be such a big surprise for them. But I think it's fair to compare it with Swift UI. Swift UI came out and it could do some things very well, but I think developers as a whole didn't know how to use it, and also I think Apple didn't really have this wholesome idea of like what exactly everything will be. When Swift UI came out, you could use it in production, but I heard that a lot of people had issues with that too, and so I expect that probably the concurrency is in a similar state. Currently it does a few things really well, but we're now to like find out the best way to use them in a correct way as well, because I've watched all the concurrency related videos, and I have I think 2,000 words of notes on like everything that I've seen in the videos, and like I'm working through them slowly, but I don't have like a clear idea right now how to sit down and like write a complete app that is based on the new concurrency features. So I think it's fair to say 2 years, right? So next year we're gonna do a solid iteration, and then after that, when also long running products could use the new features, I think then it will be completely ready to use by everyone.
So to sum things up, probably the Comine book, which you are co-author of or author of, is still relevant, and it still be relevant for like at least a couple of years, and we will not be migrating from the Comine like just right now.
Right. So there are 4 authors in the Comine book. Me, Florent Pillet, Shai Mishali, and Scott Gardner. And so I think it's still relevant for at least a while, right? But that's the problem with like being in IT, right? Like things are changing fairly quickly, so you gotta make a good bet on like what are you gonna learn and use right now, so you're sure that it goes in your CV well for another few years, and also that your product is being easy to support for at least a while,
Right.
Okay, and we have some information that you were involved in one project that was discussed during WWDC. Can you share something with us?
Right. So I was a contractor for Apple for a while, and I was on a team that this year released DocC for Xcode. And so DocC for Xcode is a documentation compiler that produces an Apple-like style of documentation for your own frameworks. It compiles all the in-source documentation. You can extend it with Markdown documentation. You can create those. Probably everybody has seen these interactive Swift UI tutorials on Apple's website. So you can create this kind of tutorials as well in Xcode for your own frameworks. And so I worked on the compiler.
Okay.
So its primary will be people interested in it if they do their framework, not just usual project.
Right. So I'm not so sure if Doxy for Xcode currently works with Xcode projects. I'm not even sure. Like I gotta check, but I think that the primary use case is for packages or frameworks that have a documentation catalog, and so something that well, if you look at Apple's own documentation, you have all the frameworks, and so their documentation is structured in a certain way. Like this, you have the landing page for each framework, and then like the documentation is structured in a certain way so that people can relatively easy find information for types, but also like find these articles and code samples inside and so forth. So it's a richer experience. It's like a more educational experience than just like reference docs. And so I think that the primary target group is probably people who run open source projects, or maybe big companies that have like their own projects inside, and they would like write documentation for these so that people who consume those have a way to learn about them and use them correctly.
Right. And it's even called the compiler. I was not yet able to test everything there, but I understand that it will help to maintain the documentation in a proper way. So it will like warn if you're like have some problems with the references and everything. But one thing I wasn't able to check. Do you know? Maybe do you know? Will it warn me if I, for example, add a new parameter to a method and not document it? Will it warn me as a developer, or is this still something to be expected later?
Right. So that sounds like a great idea. I'm not so sure if there's a warning like that right now. But yeah, I'm not so sure.
Okay.
It will warn you about a lot of things. So,
Yeah.
as you said, if you write a wrong link, or if there's a whole bunch of different warnings you can trigger, of course. But so yeah, and this is all integrated into Xcode. So it helps you basically write a good documentation for your project.
So like continuing this topic, I believe it was announced that the DocC will be open sourced sometime into the future, right?
Yeah, in one of the sessions on WWDC it was announced that it's going to be open source, and this is what I was thinking when I was answering the previous question. Like it sounds like a good idea to have a warning like that. So if there isn't one, and everyone can open an issue, open a PR, and add the warning in.
And it seems that it might also like help with the adoption of the DocC. Like when it's more open and more people can like add their own features, it probably might help. Yeah, at least I hope so.
Right. Well, once Doxy is open source, people can do whatever they want. I mean, they can fork and like take it in a completely different direction if they want to, or like remove a bunch of stuff or add a bunch of stuff, or they can do whatever they want as long as they, of course, conform to the open source license. They can do whatever they want. So I hope that they will find use cases for Doxy in like a whole myriad of situations. I hope so. I mean, it was all the work. I would like people to get value out of it.
And would you add something to DocC, some features, do you think something missing?
Right. I don't know. I didn't have time to think about this just yet. I'm currently taking like a long break, so I think first I need to relax a little bit, and then I can think about. And of course, I want to wait until the time that Doxy is actually open source, so
right.
I could take it for a spin for my own projects and so forth.
I have one like feature I would like to be added to DocC later on, like probably as soon as possible when it was open source, is the idea that I will not need the rewrites when I publish the documentation on the web server. So I believe, that like most of platforms probably will be able to handle that, but that's something still like kind of like I would prefer something like as you do in some graphic editors, like press like export for web, and it creates a like web package which I just get put to the site, do nothing more, and it just works. Hope that's, and it feels that there might be some that other developers might want that too. So it might be somewhere in the plans of when it's open sourced, or like maybe before that. I don't know. Like, let's hope so.
All right, yeah, I saw Paul Hudson sharing on Twitter that he was working already on something like that. Just a converter.
Oh, okay, yeah.
just a converter like a command line tool. But as soon as the source is open, I guess that it wouldn't really take him a long time to do that. Yeah.
Right.
So we can see that you have a lot of activities, contractor work, conferences, workshops, open source development. Can you give some advices how to manage, maybe use some time management tools, or how do you manage to do all this?
Right. I don't know. I really, this is a good question. I don't really have an answer for it. Like something like prepared to say. I don't use a lot of like productivity tools at all. I have personally for myself, I have like a Trello board where I just keep like a list of ideas or projects that I'm working on, and my calendar for things that are fixed in time. But I think that's it. I can't really give like a lot of advice. Probably my only advice would be like to focus on things that are more value, because I've seen like some people would do a lot of small things that just distract them all the time, and just switching, like context switching, will like eat all their time, and so they have like a time management problem. I focus on just very few things at a time, very few projects, and so like I will just have like a couple or three, but they will be larger and longer running, and this helps me avoid a lot of context switching, and just be focused. If
Yeah.
that sounds reasonable.
Well, yeah. So that's actually an interesting idea. I mean, like to focus the number of things you're like doing actively. I mean, yeah, that's actually a good advice, I think. We know that you write books. So what does inspire you doing that? And like probably one more question, like in the follow up to that, how do you fight with procrastination? If that's the case for you, I mean, we don't know, but like if you are to write a book, I mean, even like to write something, sometimes it's like it's really hard to start and like to push yourself to actually doing that. And how do you work with that?
Right. So first of all, I think for many it's difficult to work on a book because they just do it for the first time, and like when I was working on my first book, it was also very, very difficult, and it was just trial and error the whole time. But as I said, I'm working with my friend Ray and his publishing company for, I think it was 2011 when we worked on iOS 5 by tutorials. That was the first project together with him and a few more people, and so it has been 10 years now. And since I worked on a whole bunch of projects like that, I think just the repetition has me into a certain what do you call, like a track, where once the wheels got on the tracks, then like everything runs smoothly. But I think the biggest benefit of working with them is that with a real publishing house is that they have an editor who makes sure that the English is pleasant. There's a technical editor whose only role is to go over your code and make sure that like all the APIs are correctly used. Goes into documentation, checks if everything like checks out what you're saying, and so forth and so forth. There's an artist who takes your doodles and makes them into like proper illustrations and so forth. And so in the end, like my role as an author is to come up with real life examples, and then write the accompanying text to the code. But like this is everything that I'm focusing on. And so it's kind of like the same as what I was just saying before. Like I'm focusing on what I can do, and then everything else is just taken care of other people. And so, as I said, once it starts going, then it's really like rolling. So yeah, I mean, there's always probably nicer to go to the beach and have like a cocktail or whatever. But the thing is that since I don't, but that doesn't really, like sets me back with work.
One question that can't me leave alone always. I'm always thinking about it. Who and how chooses an animal for a cover for books.
Nicely spotted. So each book in the current catalog of Ray's website has an animal in front, and so all the iOS related books. Oh, I don't know if that's secret or not. I mean, everybody can figure it out if they have a look at the catalog. So all the iOS books have a water kind of animal on the front, and all the Android books have an air kind of animal on the front. And so usually if there's one author, then he picks the animal, and if there's more authors, then there's a meeting to discuss. And so for the Comine book, we have an ice bear, a polar bear on the cover, which we had to research in Wikipedia and find out it's actually considered a water animal because it dives and so forth and so forth. So we had to make a case with the illustrator and artist that it is in fact a water animal. So we got that off the cover.
Okay, that covers one of my gestalts. Now I know how it's chosen. And do you have some nostalgia of Objective-C? Because it looks like all the new features and frameworks go away from it.
Right. So I did use Objective-C for since 2009 till 2014. That's 5 years now. And if you look at the dates, I mean, I've been using, I think, Swift longer now than Objective-C. And I know when Swift came out, I didn't feel that I need a different language. But now that Swift is here, I feel like, yeah, that's actually much, much better. So I don't have any kind of nostalgia. There were fun things that you could do with Objective-C, that you can't really do with Swift, and I'm talking mostly about like introspection and dynamic, like all kind of dynamic stuff and so forth. But I don't really miss that. I mean, I think Swift has a lot more newer and more interesting features like structured concurrency that I'd much rather have. So no, I don't have nostalgia about this. Why is there many people that are still nostalgic about Objective-C?
I think it's
Definitely.
polarized. Yeah, there are a lot of people who were new to Objective-C and they were scared of the braces when parentheses or everything and the long method names, and that was something like there were a lot of discussions everywhere. But now they're probably all gone, and Swift is closer to other languages in terms of syntax, and therefore there are a lot of less talks of that.
But the labs for students, I know they start to study from Objective-C. They have a few lessons in the beginning still, like to understand the core, some memory management issues.
Yeah, I think, Objective-C roots back into, what is it, C, which is, I mean, it's just, yeah. I'm not saying that it's not valuable right now. I'm just saying that just Swift is modern and it's more suited to like the types of problems that we're solving right now is what I'm saying. Yeah.
And it's safer, at least. And I believe with the Swift 6, which again, they promised that it will be like the road to avoid trading errors. So it's something like the language with the constructs which will protect from the trading errors. That's something like good goal to work towards, I think.
Yeah. I'm really excited for Swift 6. Really looking forward. I hope that it doesn't really, I have this backstory with I was really into programming with Perl some time ago, like 20 years ago or so, and then it always Perl 6 was always coming and always coming and always coming. It's a long story. It's a sad story. So I hope that we're doing better than Perl in that sense.
Yeah, let's hope so. And that actually concludes our episode. Thank you for coming. That was a really, really interesting discussion. And we all even had some insights in terms of the animals on the books and anything else and something else. For all our listeners and viewers, we will come back in 2 weeks. And again, for now, thank you for coming. And we wish you luck with the probably new book coming soon. With maybe that will be something on the structured concurrency. Who knows?
That sounds like a great idea. I mean, let me write it down. Okay,
okay, thank you. Thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you for inviting
Thanks
me.
for coming.
Thank you for everyone for listening.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.